Hey guys, Jordan here, and today I want to have a little talk about DC's newest reboot, which is of course the DC Universe Rebirth. Now, I know this isn't exactly a complete reboot like we've seen with Flashpoint and the New 52. However, what DC are doing here is they're taking elements of the New 52, they're keeping them on, but they're also changing them slightly, bringing back characters and making tweaks so that the original histories of the characters are coming back into play. Which I think is a smart move because a lot of people, the New 52 was quite hit or miss. Good elements brought in, bad elements brought in, and a lot of people didn't like the fact that they kind of not exactly got completely rid of, but kind of changed the histories of the characters slightly. So this is kind of redressing the balance, and personally, I think it's done very well. I think it's done in a way that keeps the characters updated and new, brings back some old elements that are good, and brings back some old characters which are good. With also a very interesting way to have done this, which I'll get to in a second. But having a look at the first issue DC Universe Rebirth comic itself, you can see we get a nice cover here. We get the Trinity, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman reaching for a hand here, a blue hand, which I'll get to once we get to the end of this. And yeah, so it's that kind of man reaching for God type pose we see, because the blue hand here is actually the one that's doing the changes here, and as I said, I'll get to that in a minute. And then if you look on the back here, you can see some other superheroes. You get likes of Aquaman, the new Green Lantern, the Hal Jordan, we have Supergirl, and Shazam. Now, the one gripe I have with this new comic is we haven't seen anything of Shazam in this particular one, or any of the other ones I've read so far. And I've had a look at the solo title list, and Shazam's nowhere to be seen, so I can only hope that they bring him back in a Justice League comic or some other comic in some way, and maybe further down the line he'll get his own comic, or he'll feature heavily in the Justice League, for example. I think it would be silly to leave him out because he's such a good character, he's growing in popularity, and I know I might be biased, him being one of my favourite characters, but I really think he is underrepresented. But anyway, with that being said, can have a look into the comic now. So the basic plot of this, it follows, well, to start with, it follows a mysterious figure looking at a watch, saying it belonged to his father, his grandfather before that. So there's a bit of kind of discussion about that. It's a bit mysterious. And basically they're saying they have inadvertently changed the universe in some way. They've done it before and they've done it again here. Whether they intended to do that or not is unknown as of yet, but that's what's happened so far. The rest of the comic follows the original Kid Flash, Wally West. Now, not the new 52 black version of Wally West, but the older version, the white ginger version, as you can see here. Get Wally West there. The return, which I think is a very good idea. Now, they've kept the original they've brought back the original white ginger version, and they've kept the black version from the new 52 in as well. Now, the new Wally West is not that popular, but it's a bit silly of them to just throw him away like that if they're trying to keep the continuity not completely rebooted. So I think they've handled it quite well. So basically what we've seen is Wally West here has been trapped outside of the current continuity in the Speed Force, or so he seems to think anyway. And what he's trying to do throughout this comic is get a tether to the real, like a tether back to reality essentially. So at first he tries to go to Batman, and that's unsuccessful. He gets pulled back into the Speed Force, but he does mention points from Flashpoint in the letter that Barry gave to Batman from his father, Thomas Wayne, who was the Batman in the Flashpoint universe. So we can see that does still exist. That is still part of the continuity, which is, I think, is well done. But basically everyone has forgotten about this Wally West, and what he's trying to do is get a tether to the real world so he can come back in, and he's trying to do this by getting people to remember him and pull him back into the real world. So as we go through the comic, essentially Wally is narrating this all as a kind of outsider perspective, And the way it's done is very interesting. It gives a bit of his history, how he became Kid Flash, how he was a big fan of the original Flash, that sort of thing, how he was a member of the Teen Titans, and how 10 years has gone missing from everyone's memory. So this means that this is what happened in the New 52. It started a year one thing. So 10 years have gone missing, so basically people who are established superheroes have become novices again. Relationships have kind of reverted, so people who are married are now only friends or only going out, whatever. And people who are married are now only either going out or only friends or that kind of thing. And throughout the whole comic, we see that Wally is saying he needs to warn his friends and the people he knew and loved of this kind of oncoming threat and this person or being who is changing all of the things in this rebirth and who is altering timelines, altering reality to some extent. One thing we also see is he goes back to an older character from the Justice Society days, quite an early character, a guy called Johnny Thunder. Now, Johnny Thunder was a member of the Justice Society, a precursor to the Justice League. And as far as I can remember, he had a genie who he essentially fought with, and not fought against, but fought alongside this genie, who had various magical powers, and essentially could summon him and use him to fight against evil. Now, don't quote me on that, that's only from what I've been aware of. I've never read these Justice Society comics, but just from a bit of research, that's what I could dig up on Johnny Thunder. And basically Wally tries to use him as a tether to get back into reality, but this fails and he's kicked back into the Speed Force. Progressing on for the comic here, we get a look at the assistant of Ray Palmer. Sorry here. I'm not too sure of his name, doesn't seem to say. He must have already been established, though I'm not 100% sure what his name is. It is Mr. Choi, it just seems to say. If it says, I'll say what his name is. But he seems to be Ray Palmer's assistant. He seems to have gone missing for a while. Ryan Choi, sorry, that's his name, Ryan Choi. And from a video message he received from Ray Palmer, it seems that Ray Palmer has gone into the microverse looking for answers as to this disturbance. Because he could see that things were happening in the timeline. He went into the time pool and could see things were wrong. He assumed it was one of his older villains, I think, who would go back in time and steal various artifacts and treasures, that sort of thing. But he's uncovered something much bigger, and he needs the help of Ryan Choi here. So he leaves him a belt, and it's clear that he leaves him an atom belt, I think it's called. Sorry, it's a size changing belt, sorry. And it's clear Ryan Choi is going to need to go into the microverse and try and save Ray Palmer. So this is just setting up that Ryan Choi will, from here on, act as the Atom, I believe. Next we get on to the Blue Beetle. It's Ted Cord talking to Jamie here. And Ted Cord is an inventor. He creates a Blue Beetle suit and this big bug ship called the Scarab. And Jamie is different because he has the Scarab attached to his back. Now it's interesting here because we get Dr. Fate turning up, who reveals that the Scarab attached to Jamie's back is in fact not xenotechnology, but is in fact magic. Now much of the comic here is just setting up new characters to move on, re-establishing this sort of thing. So we establish Ted Cord is still there with Jamie being the Blue Beetles, and various other things. We get likes of the Green Lantern, the female one. We get this Pandora character, who is, if anyone's, I'll tell you about it at the end, but you can see the way Pandora is killed here. I think you'll understand who's causing all this, and it's quite an interesting little tidbit there. We also get a look at Darkseid being reborn from his daughter, which is a bit odd. That's what's happening. You also get a bit of a look at the death of Superman. In this new universe, the Superman of this world has died. and although there's another Superman coming in to take his place, I'm not too sure about that, but that's what it's saying right now. Brief look at Aquaman. There's not much changed about him, except he's now marrying offering to marry Queen Mira. Well, obviously she's not queen yet, but is offering to marry Mira and make her queen, which has obviously been rebooted. Wally tries to go back to his old wife or girlfriend Linda Lang, and unfortunately she does not recognise him, which is quite heartbreaking here. As we keep going on, he keeps thinking Wally is becoming less and less believing that he's going to be able to get tethered back to reality, visits various other people. Dick Grayson, Vic Stone and Captain Boomerang, but none of them remember him and he's still stuck outside of reality again. We get a brief look at the new Wally West, or the other Wally West, who's actually this Wally West cousin, who's also called Wally West. A bit confusing, but get essentially New Kid Flash and Old Kid Flash, I'll refer to them as. So we get a look at New Kid Flash, and Wally West seems to accept that he's not going to be able to come back into reality, and so he's passing the mantle to the new Kid Flash, the Black Wally West. And eventually, as a kind of he's kind of given up on trying to get back into reality at this point, so he just goes to Barry Allen, the second Flash, and what he says to him, and there's also Wally's uncle, I think. Yeah, I think so. And he goes to him, just thanks him for the life he's given him, thanks him for the opportunities, and though Barry can't seem to remember him, eventually he does, and he's able to pull Wally back into reality. This is what Wally needed. And now, as you can see here, Wally West is back as Kid Flash, which is a very good moment, because he's a much better Wally West in my opinion, and the other one's fine, but this is the Kid Flash, and he is back. This is what we needed. So the story progresses. Essentially, he reminds Barry of the Flashpoint event, which no one seems to be able to remember about, and he fills him in on that, and he goes to Batman eventually and decides that they're going to try and figure out who has done this. So we get Batman in the Batcave. He's having a look around, and he chisels into the rock, and what he actually finds, very exciting moment here, the comedian's pin. Now what this does is it tells us that the Watchmen have now been brought. Now with this reveal of the Watchmen being present in the current DC universe, essentially what it does here is it reveals to us that the person with the watch, the person with kind of creating and assembling this watch, and the person behind all of this changing of the universe is in fact Dr. Manhattan. Now this is a very, very well done plot point, I think, because the Watchmen is such a popular franchise, not franchise, but popular book, and to bring them back, I think, is great. Now I'm not exactly sure which of them they're going to bring back. If they're just going to bring in Dr. Manhattan as the one behind this. They brought in the comedian's pin, so obviously we know the comedian is dead by this point because the bloodstain is on the pin, and obviously that means he's dead. So I'm not sure if this is post-Watchmen continuity, if you see what I mean. So, spoilers if you've not read Watchmen yet, Rorschach will be dead, and the comedian will be dead. So, I don't know if they're going to bring back any of the other Watchmen characters, but it's an interesting thing to look at. So we can see this narration here is in fact from Dr. Manhattan. The last thing he says, "I did the right thing, didn't I? It all worked out in the end. Nothing ends, Adrian. Nothing ever ends." So that is one of the last conversations between Dr. Manhattan and Adrian Veidt, who is Ozymandias, who, if you've read the comic, you'll know, lets this giant monster into New York, kills millions of people to save the rest of the world from nuclear apocalypse. And what we see here is that discussion happening where Dr. Manhattan says that nothing ever ends, because Adrian believes he's ended it, Dr. Manhattan says it doesn't. So this is interesting. This bleeds into the rest of the comics. Now, with that being said, we have had a look at the DC Universe Rebirth comic, and what is my overall opinion on it? I think it's very good. I think it's well done. Bringing in the Watchmen, very good idea, or at least Dr. Manhattan. And I think this is promising. I think this has good promise, and it can go on to better things. Now, what I've picked up so far, I have the Action Comics. You can see here, Superman. The Detective Comics #1, the Batman Rebirth #1, Green Lanterns #1, Aquaman #1, other Green Lanterns #1, Green Arrow #1, another Batman #1, and the Flash #1. So, I have read all of these, and I will be doing some videos on these, how the characters are now moving on from this Flashpoint, moving on from this original Rebirth into their own respective stories and the effects it has. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll get back to you later. Thanks very much.